The Princess Hypothesis. Once there lived an atrocious princess named Princess Tulip. On her good days, Tulip was cranky and cantankerous. On her bad days, she was sneaky and stubborn. One sneaky and stubborn day, Princess Tulip decided to go for a walk. Well, a walk is what she told her royal nanny. But that was simply an excuse, part of a very sneaky and very stubborn plan. For you see, Princess Tulip had a rather long list of complaints about life at the castle, and she had just come up with a rather brilliant plan for how to solve everything once and for all. Would you like to hear her list of complaints? It went like this. I hate 1. Smiling at royal guests. 2. Eating broccoli. 3. Making my bed. 4. Saying please. 5. Changing my underwear. 6. Waiting my turn. Furthermore, I can't 1. Paint the cat. 2. Stay up until midnight. 3. Play with firecrackers. 4. Eat chocolate pie for breakfast. 5. Cut my own hair. Or 6. Throw ice cream cones out the castle window. That was Princess Tulip's list of complaints. Would you like to hear her plan? It went like this. 1. Walk to pond. 2. Catch frog. 3. Kiss frog. 4. Marry prince. 5. Move out. 6. Get my own castle. 7. Do exactly as I please. That was Princess Tulip's plan. So, whistling innocently, she hurried down the path towards the pond. Meanwhile, in the next door kingdom, there lived another princess named Princess Sassafras. She, too, had good days and bad days. On her good days, Sassafras was sweet and scientific. On her bad days, she was hyper and hypothetical. This day, Princess Sassafras was feeling unusually unhappy. In fact, there was a whole list of things that was bothering her. For a while, Sassafras sat, staring out her royal window, feeling the royal breeze, and thinking. Then she jumped up. She knew just what to do. Grabbing her royal binoculars, Princess Sassafras headed for the door. Do you want to know what was bothering Princess Sassafras? It was 1. Not enough microscopes. 2. No palace laboratory. 3. Not enough math homework. 4. Too many frilly dresses. 5. The royal telescope is too small. 6. Not allowed to have a chemistry set. And 7. Need a way to test my hypothesis that frogs do not turn into princes when kissed. That is what was bothering Princess Sassafras. Do you want to know what she planned to do? It was 1. Take a nice walk to the pond. Note, enjoy fresh air and sunshine on the way, scientifically proven to improve one's mood. 2. Observe frogs in their natural environment, being sure to take notes in your logbook. 3. Catch a frog. 4. Use guidebooks to find out what kind it is. 5. Test my frogs do not turn into princes when kissed hypothesis. 6. Do the test privately, just in case. That was what Princess Sassafras planned to do. So, whistling happily, she started down the path towards the pond. After a delightful stroll, Princess Sassafras arrived at the pond. What luck! There, not far from the edge, floated a bright green lily pad, and on it was an even brighter green frog, with unusual brown speckles and a hint of pink on his belly. Oh, a most interesting specimen indeed. Princess Sassafras was tempted to scoop the frog up immediately. But she knew how important it was to be organized and observational, so taking out her notebook, she began to write. Date, May 17th. Time, 2:41 p.m. Location, frog pond, medium-sized, depth unknown. Local weather, warm, sunny with some clouds. Local plants. Princess Sassafras lifted her binoculars to her eyes and began a list of the plants she saw around the pond. Tree, willow, weeping. Rhododendron, red, flowering. Grass, tall, lots. Flowers, daisies, white. Princess, tulip, cranky. Tree, apple, Princess Sassafras paused. She carefully swiveled her binoculars back to the far side of the crabapple tree. Sure enough, there stood Princess Tulip. What an icky surprise! Worse, Tulip seemed to be staring intently at the same frog Princess Sassafras was in the middle of observing. For a moment, their eyes met. Suddenly, there was an explosion of movement as both princesses made a lunge for the frog. Slowed by her notebook and binoculars, which she had carefully flung onto the bank behind her, Princess Sassafras was just a little too late. She had just enough time to see Princess Tulip catch the frog before she herself slipped into the pond with a tremendous baloosh. And as if that wasn't tragic enough, Sassafras got a slick smack in the face from the lily pad on the way down. Princess Sassafras stood up soggily. She couldn't help noticing that the pond water came up well past her knees. She would have to remember to add that observation to her logbook later. And she also couldn't help noticing that Princess Tulip was standing by the edge of the pond laughing and laughing. Tulip pointed at Sassafras and squealed with nasty glee. Holding the frog out in a very rough manner, she waved it in Sassafras's face. Yeah, banana. Sassafras tried to catch ya. Wanted a frog, kissed a lily. The frog is mine, and you look silly. And for just a moment, Princess Sassafras forgot to be sweet and scientific. She even forgot to be organized and observational. Instead, Sassafras sprang straight up out of the pond, thwacked the startled Tulip in the face with a slimy wad of green pond goo, and snatched the frog out of her hands. Then she grabbed her notebook and binoculars, and Princess Sassafras marched home, dripping all the way. Princess Tulip, stunned to stone, stood as the goo slid slurpily down her neck. She glared after the departing Sassafras. "Just you wait, Sassafras! Just you wait!" she shrieked. "That frog is my ticket out of here, and you can't have it!" And with that, Princess Tulip turned and stomped home, fuming all the way. Back at the palace, Princess Sassafras
slipped up the back staircase to her royal bedroom and settled the frog carefully in her terrarium, where plenty of water and a few unfortunate flies and crickets waited. Once Sassafras had found herself some dry clothes, she settled in to search for the frog in her guidebook. Sassafras was soon stumped. On both page 196 and page 197 of her book sat frogs that looked almost exactly like hers. One was called the Northern Rosebelly. The other was called the Eastern Lilac Belly. Sassafras lived in the Northeast, so which kind was hers? Sassafras held the guidebook up to the side of the terrarium. The frog studied the two pictures carefully, but not very helpfully. Then it wandered off to catch a fly. Sighing, Princess Sassafras headed down to the royal library to see if any of the books there could explain how to tell a rose belly from a lilac belly. Meanwhile, in the next kingdom, Princess Tulip had also arrived home. On her way in, she slammed the front door of the palace so hard that she shattered the royal hallway mirror, launched 16.5 plates out of the royal cupboard, scared the royal cat into a bottle brush, and knocked 14 bricks loose from the royal turret. When she saw what had happened, Tulip opened the door, stepped outside, and slammed it again. This time she scared the cat Skinny, launched a dozen royal photos off the royal mantelpiece, shattered the royal coffee maker, and out in the royal courtyard, bricks from the turret fell like raindrops. Suddenly, a royal guardsman came careening across the courtyard. "Run, Princess Tulip, run!" he hollered. "We are under attack! Quickly, into the castle! Don't be afraid, I'll protect you." The guardsman waved his bow and arrow around menacingly in all directions at once. "Oh, please," sniffed Tulip. "You couldn't protect me from a wet daffodil. Now stop waving that thing around." And with that, she swept the bow and arrow out of his hands and stormed into the castle. When the door slammed behind her for the third time, the entire turret fell off. It landed right on top of the poor guardsman. Luckily, he was not squished, but it took the other royal guardsman over an hour to chisel him free. Tulip stomped up the royal stairs and into her royal bedroom, where she flung the bow and arrow down onto the royal floor and glared angrily out the royal window. She needed a way to get that frog back. Just across the forest sat Princess Sassafras's castle. Tulip could even see the curtains blowing in Sassafras's bedroom window. No doubt Froggy was right there somewhere, practically within sight. If only somehow she could... Princess Tulip felt a plan coming on. A very sneaky, very stubborn plan. Grinning wickedly, she headed down to the royal barn. Soon Tulip returned, carrying a very long piece of royal rope and a royal saddle snitched from the royal stable. She tied one end of the rope tightly to the end of the guardsman's arrow. Then, picking up the bow, Tulip aimed it out the window at a large tree conveniently located right beside Sassafras's window. Lucky for Tulip, it was a very strong bow, and she was a very good shot. For on her very first try, the arrow dug deep into the tree trunk. The rope trailed behind it, a dangling pathway across the woods that separated the two castles. Next, Tulip fastened the saddle around the rope. With no horse to fill it, the saddle dangled empty and upside down. Then Tulip tied her end of the rope tightly to the bedpost. And finally, quicker than a frog after a grasshopper, Tulip jumped up into the windowsill and pushed off the ledge. Sitting smugly in the upside-down saddle, Tulip pulled herself hand over hand along the rope, swaying sneakily and stubbornly ever closer to Sassafras's side of the forest. Sassafras herself sat in the royal library practically hidden behind a huge pile of books. Finally, she found what she was looking for. Aha! She exclaimed happily. I need to find out if the frog pond has speckled frog eggs on the bottom of underwater leaves or plain green frog eggs on the tops of the underwater leaves. It is the only way to tell the lilac bellies from the rose bellies. Oh, and if I'm quick, I will have just enough time to check before supper. I'm off to find my royal snorkel and my royal swimsuit. Right about then, Princess Tulip arrived at Sassafras's bedroom window. Inside, she saw the frog sitting in his terrarium, contentedly munching on a grasshopper. Cut that out, bug breath, she hissed. You're mine now, and there will be no more munching crunchy legs if I'm going to have to kiss you. She reached into the terrarium and yanked out the frog. She reached into her pocket and yanked out a piece of gum. Here, chew this, why don't you? She said, stuffing the gum into the frog and the frog into her pocket. Now hold still, Warty. Here we go. With that, Tulip jumped back into the saddle and began the trip home. Just then Sassafras arrived in a royal hurry to find her royal bathing suit. See you soon, frog, she called cheerfully. She waved at the terrarium, but, most unfortunately, Sassafras did not actually look. When Tulip arrived home, she pulled the frog from her pocket and held it up where she could give it a good glare. Look here, floppy feet, she snarled. This is how it's gonna go. I'm going to kiss you, you're going to marry me, and then we're out of here. Stick with the plan, do as I say, and no one croaks. Okay, you green prince-making machine, let's get this over with. Princess Tulip held her nose. Princess Tulip puckered her lips. She brought the frog up, up, up. Just as she was about to smack a smooch on the struggling frog, the royal gong sounded to announce the royal supper. Princess Tulip stopped. She snorted impatiently, then stuffed the frog under her blankets. No funny business, lily lips, she ordered. I'll be back soon. In the pond, Sassafras was having a wonderful time. So far, she had found no sign of frog eggs. But she had collected 14 different samples of pond plants and observed 3 kinds of fish and 6 kinds of underwater insect. She had just enough time for one more dive before heading home for her royal supper. Back in Tulip's room, the royal maid had just arrived to turn down the royal covers. Imagine her surprise when she found the bed already occupied. Ah! She shrieked. Then, not knowing what else to do, she scooped up the frazzled frog into her royal maid's apron and with a phenomenal flick sent it flying out the window. Up, up, up into the sky flew the frog, its legs pumping frantically. Out, out, out over the forest it sailed, eyes bulging desperately. Down, down, down it spiraled, heart thumping crazily. And then the frog landed with a tremendous sploosh right in the pond beside the very surprised Sassafras. Sassafras picked the frog up gently. It looked extra green and rather seasick. How? Sassafras started to ask, but the frog looked so miserable, she simply carried it home without any more questions. Back in her room, she laid it gently on her pillow. Then, without even thinking, she leaned over and kissed the poor frog before hurrying downstairs for her royal supper. When Princess Tulip returned to her room after supper, the frog was nowhere to be found. Oh, drat! Tulip fumed. I should never have left that stupid frog alone. Tulip was interrupted by a voice behind her. Time for bed, Tulip, it said, and don't forget to change your underwear. When Princess Sassafras returned to her room after supper, The frog was nowhere to be found. "Oh dear," Sassafras fussed. "I should never have left that poor sick frog alone. Sassafras was interrupted by a voice behind her. "I had a hypothesis," it said. Sassafras turned in surprise to find a tall, friendly-looking prince standing in the moonlight. "It went like this," said the prince, smiling. "When it's time to get kissed, pick the princess who loves you for what you are and wonders what you might become. Not the one that puts up with what you are just to get what she thinks you will become." He paused, then added, "Well, of course, to properly test my hypothesis, I will now have to find an evil witch, have myself turned back into a frog, and try a smooch from that atrocious tulip." Sassafras and the prince looked at each other. Suddenly the air filled with an abrupt explosion of laughter as they both burst into utterly outrageous giggles. They laughed until their sides had stitches. They laughed until they snorted and sneezed. They laughed until, well, as you probably already know, laughter has been scientifically proven to be a very sweet first step towards happily ever after.